Hello everyone, my name is Lauren McCusker and I'm going to be talking about nurses during the American Civil War. I wanted to explore this topic because oftentimes students do not learn about nurses and medicine during the Civil War except about amputations. I will talk about the background of the American Civil War, including medicine, then explain why nurses volunteered and about different organizations that aided the war effort. Then I will talk about nurses' direct roles of physical, spiritual, and medical aid. Finally, I will explain the barriers and lack of formal recognition these nurses faced during and following the war. My thesis is women played a crucial role in the American Civil War as nurses for the Union. They exemplified patriotic ideology as they supported men from the battlefields to the hospitals and changed the perception of women in a male-dominated medical profession. Next, I'm going to be talking about the background. The American Civil War was fought between the Union and the Confederate States of America from 1861 to 1865. There are 750,000 fatalities, many caused by disease from improper medical treatment. The weapons used consisted of mini bullets, cannon shrapnel, cannonballs, bayonets, and swords. The medical advice ranged from astronomy to balancing the four elements in the body to acupuncture. Once the Civil War began, the medical industry changed culturally and with their practices. Injured soldiers received treatments at field hospitals or rode the wagon ambulance to a military hospital. Typically, men sought medical care in their home from women, mothers, sisters, wives, and sometimes consulted a doctor. And the reason why this changed was because the Union did not have enough men to send the injured soldiers home. Created as a first defense for battle wounds, field hospitals included doctors and nurses who treated wounds and further evaluated future treatment for injured soldiers. Some new surgical improvements implemented included anesthesiology with chloroform or ether. Doctors also used drugs like calomel, opium, and quinine as antiphlogistic methods. Below, I have an image of a Union soldier watching over Confederate prisoners. The middle picture is a field hospital, and the picture to the far right is a general hospital. There are many reasons that nurses joined the war, but the three main reasons were for patriotism, for injured loved ones, and abolishment of slavery. Nurse Mary G. Holland clearly stated her patriotism for her country would continue even her death. No lapse of years can cool the patriotism that urged them to the responsibilities they took upon themselves. Patriotism also meant nurses took care of injured soldiers as part of their duty and represented their family that was not there. John G.B. Adams recounted a nurse, Mrs. Mary Lee of Philadelphia, who aided one of his brothers in arms injured at Antietam. Despite the fact Mrs. Mary Lee and the soldier were not related, she said, "I will take his mother's place." Adams stressed that the nurses would forever be in the hearts of the veterans, and they would never grow weary of telling their children of the angels of mercy. The next reason nurses joined because of loved ones. An example of this is Nurse Jane Dunbar, who received a letter from a steward at a New York hospital that stated her husband was very sick. She nursed her husband back to health, and he went back to the army, and she stayed for the 5 other men still injured. Finally, you have abolishment of slavery. Nurse Susie King Taylor accepted a position in the 33rd U.S. Colored Troop, and she said that after the war, even when the Freedmen's Bureau lost her mother's money and her own in the banks, she supported the Union because they freed her race. Next, I'm going to be talking about the U.S. Sanitary Commission. The United States Sanitary Commission regulated the Union hospitals. President Lincoln created the USSC on June 13, 1861, and was led by Secretary General Frederick Law Olmsted. The USSC trained officials and nurses to inspect camps and visit hospitals, to oversee conditions and ask the patients if they needed anything. The USSC also set up field hospitals with their trained nurses and distributed donated goods to the camp. To the left is a picture of Frederick Law Olmsted, and then to the right is a quote from the book talking about the role of nurses when they go to visit hospitals. Next, I'm going to be talking about the different Catholic orders that nurses were a part of. The three religious orders that were very important and influential during the Civil War were Sisters of Mercy, Sisters of the Holy Cross, and Sisters of Mount St. Vincent. The Sisters of Mercy volunteered to support the men in the Union and in the South. The Sisters of Mercy in Charleston, South Carolina, donated goods and asked other families to donate goods to the Union prisoners of war camps and hospitals. The New York chapter sent 14 sisters to Hammond General Hospital as nurses too. The quote I have about your letter of the 27th of February is talking about how important these sisters were because they helped nurse the soldiers back to health, and when the soldiers weren't nursed back to health, then the families would appreciate all that they did. The Sisters of the Holy Cross sent 63 sisters to 3 military hospitals in Kentucky. Here the sisters nursed the soldiers with measles and camp dysentery. And one big issue that these sisters came up against was because they were Catholic, a lot of the Southern Protestant leaders in the hospitals thought that they would try to convert the soldiers. But here, because of their hard work and dedication, you have a Protestant chaplain that said that these sisters stood their post without ever giving up. Finally, the Sisters of Mount St. Vincent, Cincinnati, earned the title of the Catholic organization that supplied the most nurses to the war. Almost half of the sisters trained and built their own hospital called St. Joseph Military Hospital in Central Park grounds that Union soldiers were sent to. Interesting enough, one of their sisters, M. Prudentia Bradley, died from contracting an illness, and she received a military award for her service. This is interesting because typically nurses were not registered, so even during and after the war they didn't receive any awards. So for the fact that she did receive this award was amazing. Next, I'm going to talk about the roles of nurses. Nurses had 3 main roles: physical, spiritual/entertainment, and medical aid. Physically, nurses bathed, changed the men's clothes, prepared food, served food, stocked shelves with needed supplies, administered medicine, filled out discharge papers, and worked alongside surgeons to determine who needed additional care. The head nurse was called the matron, and they were in charge of overseeing the sanitary conditions of the hospitals and allocating supplies, and oftentimes they cooked for 4,000 men every day, or however many men were in the hospital. In terms of entertainment, nurses wrote letters, they sang, and some even kept soldiers' belongings during battles. The Vermont soldiers entrusted Nurse Amanda Felch to notify their families of their demise, to keep their belongings safe during battles, and to send keepsakes home to families. And Nurse Alida Fowle and Nurse Helen Gilson both sang to lift the injured soldiers' spirits. Next, you have the medical aid that nurses did. All the Union surgeons obtained an allopathic degree due to the design of the American Medical Association exam that the Union used to hire surgeons. And allopathic doctors focused on a drug approach to cure illness, using opium, mercury, arsenic, and antimony, and they would also prescribe bloodletting. Some of the therapies that they practiced were larvae therapy, bloodletting, and hypodermic therapy. Larvae therapy is where the nurses would place leeches on the affected area or assisted the doctors during venesection or cutting of the veins. Hypodermic therapy was when surgeons ordered nurses to apply topical nitric acid in laboratory solutions that included iodine, iron, and turpentine to wounds through syringes. Then these nurses would administer a poultice or a cloth filled with botanicals like mud, flaxseed, or elm on top of the wound. Bloodletting was another therapy, and it was prescribed because allopathic doctors believed that if they got rid of all the bad blood, then the disease would be cured. Next, I'm going to be talking about some of the barriers nurses faced. The sphere of domesticity, or the cult of domesticity, impacted the beliefs that women should only stay in the house and raise children because they were morally superior to men, and that they shouldn't work outside of the house. So this impacted men's view of them, and men did not want women in the hospital. Nurse Julia Dunlap said that a lot of men would say women are not needed in these hospitals, depend upon it, ladies are a bore, and that men are victimized. Even the rare female trained doctors such as Mary Walker, Esther Hill Hawks, and Sarah Chadwick were assigned as nurses before they received their doctor position in the field and general hospitals during the war. Even then, the only reason they were assigned as a doctor was due to the lack of physicians in the area. Soldiers did not like the aide and female nurses initially, but they grew attached to their nurses as they acted as replacements to their mother and sisters, and even called them angels of mercies or other enduring terms. Brigade Surgeon General L. Dunn worked in Clayton General Hospital, and during the Battle at Bull Run said, "While the battle was raging at the fiercest on Friday, who should drive up in front of our hospital but this same woman? She was again a welcome visitor to both the wounded and the surgeons." And he was talking about Clara Barton. Clara Barton and other remarkable nurses like her changed surgeons' opinion of women in hospitals. Women from all walks of life came together to serve their country. These women faced criticisms and broke through barriers. And organizations like the USSC and Catholic Charities changed the physical and emotional experience of the soldiers, and these soldiers always respected and remembered their love. These women earned the title Angels of Mercy.